Okay, so we're going to get started up. You got 2 handouts today. You got your exercise as is normal, and that we'll go through that, and I'll actually do a live demonstration of everything that you're going to do in Photoshop. So I'll walk you through step by step for how we're doing all that we're doing in our post-processing of photographs that we took last class. But you also received your first assignment for the class. And remember I said that there would be somewhere in the neighborhood of 7 assignments or so for the class as we go through. It might be less. I don't know. I haven't officially determined all of them. We'll see how you guys do, and I'll react to that as we go forward. But your first assignment is a pretty short one. There'll be another Photoshop assignment after it. So we'll start with your best photograph. And in this particular assignment, we're looking for quality of photograph. We're looking for compositional technique. We're looking for high quality post-processing to really make that image pop and shine. And we'll go through what those strategies would be. This is not meant to be something where you do a bunch of Photoshop editing and collage or anything like that. This is about a photo that you took and you did basic post-processing to it to make it a really good quality image. That's the point of this particular exercise. Some people take it a little too far, and I'm just trying to make sure that you understand it's not meant for you to take it into the collage realm. We'll get to, touching things. Maybe not. We'll see. How nice, right? Okay. See, I told you I was having issues with the projector today. Anyway, so we will continue. I'll try to bring that back up and make sure that it works. But you, as part of this, you need to have it turned in next Wednesday before the start of class. So it's in 1 week. Today's Wednesday. It needs to be next Wednesday before the start of class. So you have 1 week to do it. I'm expecting 2 things. The first thing is the post, which should be obvious. But as part of that post, I want you to post the original image. I want you to post the one that has been post-processed, so the corrected image, the good image at the end. And I also want you to write a paragraph describing what it is that you did in Photoshop to make the image better. So you did a levels adjustment, you did a curves adjustment, whatever it is, I want you to specify these are the things that I did. Just because in today's lecture, for example, we'll go through curves adjustment, levels adjustment, we'll go through a pop filter, we'll do a black and white filter. Just because we go through all of those doesn't mean that you have to do all of them in your final image. This one is about making the image look the best that it can be. So you decide what's appropriate in it. And so that's due next Wednesday before the start of class. I also ask that you print it out on an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper. Nothing fancy, no fancy photo paper. You don't have to go to a photo lab, none of that kind of stuff. You print it to the computer next door, the color laser printer, and you hand me an 8.5 by 11 sheet with your image on it. Hopefully your name's on it too. That's just backup in case something were to happen and the website crashed or whatever. I have backup that you turned it in. Does that make sense? So I'm not grading that version. I grade the online version. So if it doesn't look good or whatever, that's fine. I just need a record of it. Should be in color, though. OK, let me see if I can fix this high-quality projector here. And then we will continue. Not officially. I mean, the idea is that you should turn it in at the end of the class period. However far you got, you turn something in. Remember, they're pass, not pass, so if it's incomplete, it's not a big deal. I just want a record that you were here and you were working.
But not like in the afternoon.
You can turn it in the afternoon. That's fine. If you need a little bit more time, this is going to kill me today. If you need a little bit more time, that's fine. If you turn it in, before the next class, that's fine too. All right, sorry, you guys have to bear with me a little bit. They got happy with the zip ties, and somehow it's not making life good here.
Those are easy to put on.
OK. We will give it a shot. Don't touch anything, right? Don't touch the cord. Gentle. All right. So let's continue. So we're going to talk today about the post-processing of photographs. And in all likelihood, if you're, let's say you're a professional photographer, you do wedding photography for a living. Okay? This is what you live to do. You go to people's weddings, you take pictures and whatever. Even if you're that good and you photograph that much with your camera, there are always going to be little corrections to make. And so the best photographers don't have to do as many corrections, but even those of us that are amateur photographers can do corrections on the computer. And what I want to talk about today is doing these corrections. What options do we have, and how can we make our images better? I can tell you right now that all of you can make your images better using the techniques we talk about today. And of course, this lost. There we go. So the first thing is a digital workflow. And the reason that I talk about a digital workflow is, generally speaking, if you're a photographer, if you're the wedding photographer, or if you're an amateur photographer, there are usually a set of steps that you do after you take your image. And this could be as simple as I took the image on my phone, and then I post it to Instagram. That's a workflow. It's a set of steps. Maybe you take it a step further. You take the photo, you apply a filter, and then you put it on Instagram. That is essentially a workflow. We could take it much further to really enhance the image and do post-processing on it. We could take it into Photoshop, and that is a much more extensive workflow. The workflow is going to vary by who you are, what the typical corrections you need to make, and what hardware, software output really is meant to be. If it's just going on Facebook, do you really care if it's the most post-processed image ever? Maybe not. But it's going to vary. If you're going to blow it up and hang it on a wall, then maybe that does matter. And you want to think about what that post-processing involves. So the workflow, number one, begins by going out and actually getting the images to begin with. If you don't have an image to begin with, you can't do anything with the image. Then we need to get them from whatever device you took the picture with. In the old days, it was very easy. You just said from your camera to your computer. Now, half the time, it's from your cell phone, and you're texting it to yourself or whatever. But you have to get it from that device to your computer to do the post-processing on it. And if you don't get it from that device to your computer, you can't really do anything. There are a variety of software packages that will help with this, and I'll talk about what those are as we go forward. Then you're going to perform some post-processing or some image correction using whatever software it is that you've chosen to use. In the case of this class, we're using Photoshop to do that. You might do some cropping, you might do some rotating of the image, you might do some other corrections, maybe you do some retouching, maybe a little clone stamping, whatever. Maybe you want to make it black and white, etc. Okay? Finally, you're going to put your output wherever it belongs. So if you're just posting to Facebook or you're just posting to Instagram, that's the final output. Maybe you're sending it to a print shop to have it printed, maybe it goes into an album, whatever the final output would be. In this class, obviously, you're turning it in. That's your assignment. Maybe it goes in your portfolio. Chances are you already have some kind of a workflow, even if you don't think about it as a workflow. Chances are you do something to your images once you take them. Maybe you post them on Instagram. Maybe you post them on Facebook. That by itself is a workflow. What software do you plan to use? What is available to you? What ecosystem do you live in? Do you live in the Apple ecosystem, therefore you use their Photos app and it all syncs and you do your edits there? Maybe you don't and you live in the Adobe app ecosystem and you use Lightroom and you use Photoshop. I don't know. What post-processing do you typically need to do? I can tell you right now that most of the images I shoot need a levels adjustment. I know that. It's just almost automatic. So the first thing that I do when I go in and correct an image is I do a levels adjustment. Because in all likelihood, that's something that I typically need when I shoot images. You will learn that as time goes on. These are the things that make my image better. And if you do that over and over again, it gets pretty fast. Are there any steps you can automate? Sometimes there are automatic scripts that you can run that just improve your images as you go forward. That can save time, certainly, as you go forward. So when you choose a piece of software, what are we going to use? Fundamental question, are you on Windows or on your Mac? That changes things. Macs have always done a little bit better, I think, with photo management and kind of built-in photo apps than Windows does. But again, I'm an Apple person, so no surprise that I lean that way a little bit. Are you going to be on your personal computer? Are you going to be on the lab computer? Are you going to be online? If you're on your personal computer, it's a lot easier because you could save all the photos on your hard drive at home. If you're here, you might do some editing, but then you have to figure out where you're going to save them, where you're going to sync them. Remember that backup lecture about saving the files and that whole thing. You have to worry about that if you're on the lab computers. Obviously, these computers have Photoshop, which is great. If you don't have Photoshop at home, you can do the processing here, which is good, but you have to pay attention to your photos. Are you performing non-destructive editing or not? And this is kind of one of those kind of critical things that you might not have thought about, but depending on what editing program you're using, are the changes that you make permanent and not reversible. So if you open up your image and you make a few changes and suddenly you didn't like one part of the changes that you did, maybe 5 or 6 steps back, do you have to undo all 5 or 6 of those steps, or can you turn off one of those steps in a random order? Photoshop's really good at this because we can decide which pieces stay on and which pieces stay off as we go through. So it's a non-destructive editing format. Some programs are destructive, some are non-destructive, and you want to think about that when you're working on it. Is it going to be a free program? Typically, these are good for up to 10,000 images or so. Or are you going to go into a professional program where you need 50, 60,000 images because you take a lot of images? How are you going to manage those images? Where do they exist on a hard drive? All that sort of thing. So what are our options that are out there? Uh-oh, I touched the cable. Still working. First option would be Google Photos, which is out there for free. Photos.google.com. It's pretty easy to use. You click on a preset, this looks better, make my image a little bit better. It's pretty easy. Anybody use this before? A few of you, maybe. Yeah, it's there. You can email, you can download, you can obviously print your photos if you need to. That's all fine. There aren't too many advanced editing features. You're not going to see a levels adjustment or a curves adjustment in this. You need to have a connection to the internet, obviously, and it's semi-destructive. So you may be able to, when you're working in it, make some, like, oh, let me go back, I didn't like that change. But at some point, you save the file, and it's permanent. It's not going to allow you to go back later on. So I would argue that it's semi-destructive. Photoshop Express is available on Android and iOS, so it's meant for your tablets. It does a fair amount of stuff that Photoshop does, but it's stripped down a bit. So you're not going to get adjustment layers, and you're not going to get some of the more advanced features. But it's free, which is nice, right? They have some pretty easy-to-use presets that let you quickly just, oh, I want to turn the image to black and white. I click on that little button, and it does pretty well. Same sort of thing, email, download, order the prints. These companies love to put in the order the prints because that's where they make extra money. You click through them, they make money. It has a few advanced editing features or filters. You obviously need to have a connection to the internet. It's on your device. That's part of how it works. It works kind of in the Adobe ecosystem, so it likes if you have a Creative Cloud subscription. That's where it manages your photos and saves them there and that sort of thing. So in that case, it becomes not free, but it's certainly something to be aware of. It is a destructive editor, so once you make the changes, they become permanent, and you can't undo them. Pixlr.com is a free website. You have to kind of search for their app version. They've kind of transitioned more into trying to manage your photos than into this app. But this app that you run online, it requires Flash. But if you look at the interface, it's almost exactly what Photoshop looks like. It has almost everything that Photoshop has in it, and it's just running in a web browser. So it's pretty cool, the stuff that you can do completely for free. It is a destructive editor. Once you save your work, that's it. Can't go back. It doesn't have adjustment layers, which is something we'll use extensively today and is one of the kind of key parts of Photoshop that makes Photoshop really good, is instead of applying the adjustment to the whole image, you're applying it to a layer that you can turn on and turn off, which is nice. But it is certainly something to be aware of. If you don't want to pay for Photoshop, you can use it, and it's awfully close. Photos is available on the Mac or on the iOS ecosystem. Apple used to have iPhoto, which you may have heard of before, and Aperture, which is their professional version. They cut out Aperture, and they moved iPhoto into Photos. So they only have one app for both the professionals and the non-professionals. I used to use Aperture, and I loved it. It was great, and it was really disheartening when they got rid of it. But that's the nature of computer programs. They do this stuff. It's OK. I mean, I like the way it manages the files. I like the way it syncs the files to my devices, and that sort of thing is good. You can get into some of the more advanced things. There is a levels adjustment. There are some of the Photoshop-like features that are built in, but it just does a better job of managing the photos than anything else. It's not the best editor in the world. If you really want to get into editing, that is what the gold standard comes in, where we get into professional options. If you want to manage your photos in a professional setting, Adobe has a product to do that that works in conjunction with Photoshop, and it's called Adobe Lightroom. You may have heard of this before. It's what, quote, the professionals use to manage all their photos when they have really big libraries. It deals a lot with how do you store and manage 60,000 photos or 100,000 photos and keep track of them. And so it's more of a management solution, though it does have a lot of the built-in basic photo editing techniques. Curves, levels, adjustments, all those kinds of things happen within this application. They are non-destructive, so you can turn them on and turn them off at will, which is really nice. Very advanced editing features, almost on a Photoshop level, but built into kind of a management application. They do have extensive metadata support. We'll talk about what metadata is in a little bit. And then, of course, we move into actual Photoshop. This is what you'll learn in this class, and this is what we'll work with. Photoshop is really the gold standard for editing photos. You can make pixel-by-pixel corrections on anything. You can turn anything into anything else. You can, if you're good at it, you can collage things. You can take pictures and combine them together and make them seamless. It really can do almost anything, which is why it's really good. But at the same time, it's not meant to manage your photo library. You open one photo, you process that one photo, you save that one photo. That's it. It's not going to deal with a library. It's not going to deal with 60,000 images. It's just one at a time. And it's really for the editing. But it is really the best editor that is out there. I should also mention there is an open source version of Photoshop called GIMP that you may have heard of that is free, which is pretty cool. And it has almost all the features that Photoshop has in it. And if it's something where you don't want to shell out the money, it might be worth downloading and trying out. But it is there, and I like to at least bring that up as a, you guys are all starving students. I was a starving student once too. Paying that Adobe script subscription every month can get a little challenging. Might be worth exploring your other options. So let's talk about organizing your images just a little bit. And I told you we get back to metadata. And the really cool thing about a digital image is that it stores other information about the photo within the photo file. So this is the stuff you can't see that's included with the photo itself. So if you remember back, maybe you had like a great aunt or somebody who used to take pictures at like the family barbecue, and she'd give you the picture and it had the little like orange date on the bottom right corner. You guys vaguely remember that? Some of you are like, I have no idea what you're talking about. But those of us that are older, not old, older, might remember that. Essentially what metadata is that date. But it's contained within the photo so that we don't actually see it. So it's extra information in the photo file itself. It contains information about the camera. It contains information about the lens that you used. It contains information about what the exposure was, what the exposure value was, what the ISO was. All that stuff that we talked about last class in the photography section shows up as part of the metadata. So here's an example of metadata right here. And if we look at this box, and we look right across here, in this particular photo, the ISO was 125. The lens was 62 millimeter. We had an exposure value of 0. We had an aperture of 5.6. And the shutter speed was 1/500th of a second. We also know that it was shot in RAW. There's my RAW. We also know what the camera was. In this case, it was a Nikon D80. And it has information about what the lens was on it. As we move further down in this list, down here, we've got the name of the file. But here we go. We've got a date, exactly when the file was shot. We're going back in time a bit, 2008. That's old, right? It has dimensions in pixels of what the size was. It has the actual file size. It has the year, etc. Okay? If I shot it on my iPhone instead of on a Nikon D80, it would contain additional information like the GPS location where I shot the picture. Do you guys remember when you first open up your phone, there's the first time you open the camera, it pops up a little thing saying, do you want to allow camera to use location services? And everybody says, sure, right? Well, guess what? Every picture you take from then on is tagged with your GPS location. That's the way it works. So those kinds of things are built into the file and into the photo itself. And so if you wanted to find out where somebody was when they took a particular photo, you could actually look that up because it's contained within the photo file itself. So then we talk about general organization. And so if you're using a program that manages organization, they have a variety of organizational structures. The simplest would be a folder or an album layout. But maybe they have other things like faces or events or places that help to organize your information as well. Albums are pretty self-explanatory. You make an album, it's kind of like the old school, you have a photo album. You put the photos of something in that album, okay? I think you guys get that. Events, photos started to get smart. Companies that do photo management software got smart about this, and they said, generally speaking, when you take photos, you take groups of photos. So you don't go out and take one photo a minute for the year, or one photo every 10 minutes. You go to somebody's birthday party, and you take 100 photos, and then you don't take photos for a couple days, and then you go somewhere else and you take some more photos for work. So these computer programs are smart enough to recognize chances are that 100 block of photos all go together. So instead of having to manually assign them to an album, you can look at it by events, or these are things that are grouped together. Faces. Facial recognition is becoming very, very common. The photo apps are kind of doling it out slowly to us. And essentially what they're saying is they can look through your photo album and they can discern who everybody is. If you tell it that it's this one person, then you go through and it's going to suggest that these are all the people that are in the photos. Therefore, you can organize all your photos by show me pictures with me in them. You know, show me pictures with somebody else in them. Show me pictures with my wife in them, whatever. And it would go through it and do that. This should be a little creepy, though, if you think about the technology making its way into basic desktop photo processing in the ability of people to do facial recognition at large. Right? It's pretty darn easy. You guys see it on Facebook, right, where it pulls up, yeah, I think this is so-and-so. Okay? So most of the photos end up in that bucket. Sometimes you have side profiles or whatever that get a little bit awkward. Places is essentially organized by GPS location. And so if you have your phone and you look at your photos, there's probably a view that is set up by geographic location because it knows where all the photos were taken. So no surprise. So let's move into the typical adjustments that you're going to be applying to a particular photograph. So the first one that we'll talk about is a crop and resize. Essentially, I took an image. I don't really like the cropping. I didn't do a good job composing a particular image. Let me go back and edit that image. When I crop and resize it, maybe it has better proportions, for example, whatever. We want to get through rule of thirds, compositional technique, that sort of thing is what we can fix in this sort of setup. And you see that whenever I'm showing these cropped images, typically the crop box that's shown here has that rule of thirds built into it. So Photoshop knows this and turns it on. So we can start to organize where the rule of thirds happens on these various pages. And so you're going to go through and you're going to see it. Maybe you're going to crop to a square. Maybe you're going to crop to a rectangle. It depends on what the final output is. But you can still use the same general rules of composition to correct. One thing that is important to talk about when we start cropping images down is essentially when we crop an image down, we're cutting out information from the photo. So if the photo was originally a certain resolution, when we crop it and get rid of parts of the photo, essentially that resolution goes down and we can't blow it up to be any bigger. Does that make sense? So this doesn't matter so much if we're posting an image to Facebook or we're looking at it online or something. But if you were going to go print the image, you would want to pay attention to how much can I really crop this down before it's going to get blurry when I go to print it. And you want to be aware of that as a factor. I just love this image. I think this is one of the greatest images. I would love to work here. Sounds fantastic. Anyway, exposure. So I showed you an example of this last class on the image that I shot in RAW that was improperly exposed. I went back and made the correction. So we could do the same thing. We can adjust that exposure back. So if we have a dark image, we can lighten it up. If we have a light image, we can darken it up. Remember, if it's a RAW file, this is a lot easier than if it's a JPEG file. So we can get more of that information back if it's a RAW file. So you might have something like this that turns out way too dark on the left, and we move over to the image that's on the right, and it's more correctly exposed. Brightness and contrast. This is an adjustment to the overall brightness of the image or an overall adjustment to the difference between black and white in a particular image. It is a very basic tool. It's kind of a heavy-handed approach, right? So you're trying to flatten out a piece of paper, and you run out and grab a steamroller, and you lay it on the ground and run it over. It's heavy-handed. Okay, so we want to do it a little bit lighter than that. So we're going to use things like levels and curves to try to make these adjustments instead. So here's a example without the levels and curves, and we'll get into levels and curves in just a second. Color saturation, vibrance of colors. We can make these kinds of adjustments as well. We can compensate for white balance problems. It's too blue, it's too orange. We can make those color shifts or those hue adjustments as necessary. And of course, all these things I'll show you how to do. So we might deal with saturation versus vibrance. So if we see these side by side, see the saturation, when we bump up the saturation to get more blues, we end up with too much orange in the face. If we're dealing with vibrance or pop, we're not getting that orange in the face, but we're still getting a lot of the blue color. Do you guys see how there's a difference between those two? And so we'll talk about how do we create that difference without creating the one on the left, but by creating the one on the right. Maybe you're going to turn it into black and white or sepia tone. Sepia is just a brown version of black and white. We can do that kind of a comparison, or we can do that kind of an adjustment. There are specific ways to do this that allow us to mimic filters that we used to be able to put on a lens. And I'll show you how we walk through that today. One of the things that we'll do as part of this is to actually convert some images to black and white, so you can see this happen. Focus. We can sharpen an image to make the edges stand out a little bit. Sometimes this is called detail. It's micro contrast. It's really important, though, to understand that if the image was blurry out of the camera, it's never going to suddenly become sharp. So you can't go backwards, right? You take the image, you shook when you took it, the image is blurred, you can't go back and not have it be blurry anymore. It doesn't work that way. But if it's small little detail, we can enhance it and get a little bit more out of it. It's hard to see on the projector. Hopefully you'll be able to see it a little bit more. The image on the left was the original. The image on the right, if you look at the edges of the pages, they're just a little bit sharper. Maybe you can see it. Maybe you can't see it. It's hard on a projector to see. But we'll go through it today, and you'll have a chance to work on that as well. Red eye reduction. Remove red eye. Anybody know why red eye shows up in the first place? Perfect. Right? So what happens? Let's go through red eye, because this is a very common thing. Okay? What happens is you're in a dark room. What happens to your eye when you're in a dark room? Your iris gets really big. Let in more light. Okay? So you're standing there, and you're with all your friends or your buddies, and you're ready to take a picture, and the person comes out with the camera, and suddenly they take a big bright flash. Well, your eyes are really big, and they haven't adjusted yet. So when they take that big bright flash, the light goes into your eye, reflects off the back surface of your eye, and comes back out and gives us red eye. Okay? That's why cameras do the little strobe flash first. They're trying to get your iris to constrict so that then they take the picture and you don't have the red eye. We can, of course, post-process it out afterward. We can get rid of that without a problem if we need to. The other thing is, if you've been to a wedding where there's one of those wedding photographers running around, I use the wedding photographer because it's like the stereotypical professional photographer. Okay? So you've been to a wedding, and you see them running around, and they have the big camera, but they always have the flash like mounted way up here, right? Or it's reflecting off the ceiling, or it has a big dome on it, or whatever, right? The further away the flash and the lens are, the less likely it is for that light to go into somebody's eyes and reflect back out for red eye. So when we look at our phones, right? You look at the camera that's on the phone. If I can flip mine over, right? The flash is like right next to the camera. So if I were taking a picture, the light goes almost exactly in line with the camera, is going to reflect right back out. If, however, the flash was over here and the camera's over here, this light isn't going to reflect back out as easily. Make sense? That's why the wedding photographers do that. Then we get into levels. And I told you almost all the images that I shoot end up having a levels adjustment. And essentially what a levels adjustment is it's allowing us to pick what is true black in an image and what is true white in an image. And I'm going to have to flip back and forth between these slides a little bit to help explain this. Okay, so the next slide here, I have an image on the left and an image on the right. So the image on the left was the original image. And when you look at it, certainly compared to the image on the right, it looks a little bit grayer as a whole. But if I were looking at this image and I were trying to pick out what is true white and what is true black in an image, right? And I were looking at this, the closest thing to white might be right there. That might be the brightest part of my image. And the closest thing to black is probably in one of these shadows, right in there. So what a levels adjustment does is it allows me to say, you know what? This value is actually true white, and this value is actually true black. And so redistribute the image such that that's true white and that's true black. So we have the image on the right here where this then becomes true white, and these shadows become true black, and you can see how much more it pops out. You can see a lot more of the texture. So we look at this in terms of something called a histogram. And this is right here on the right. This is a histogram here, or a levels adjustment. And this graph that goes up like this represents the distribution of pixels in various colors from black to white. So if you imagine the image in black and white, and we counted the number of pixels that were, 10% gray, and we plotted them on the graph, we'd have a bunch of little dots that went at the 10% line. Okay, so there's, 200,000 that are at that 10%. And then we move over here, and this is a medium gray. It's like 70% or something. And we have a whole bunch of them. We have, 18,000. I don't know. I'm making up numbers. But the point is we counted all those little pixels that represent that gray value. So this graph represents that distribution of pixels. So where the graph, let me get rid of that for a second. So where the graph ends right there is where the photo's lightest pixels fall. Where the graph ends right here is where the pixels in the image that are darkest fall. This overall box, however, this is true white and this is true black. So you see we're missing a big chunk of black and a big chunk of white in the image. So essentially what we do is we take this white point and we pull it over to right there where it matches the bottom tail of the graph. We take the black point and we pull it over to where it matches right there. So if we pinch those two ends in, we convert the image from this into that. And I'll show you this live, so we'll see it and you'll see it happen. Now there are occasions where you have a histogram and it goes from black to white and there's no opportunity to pinch in. If that's the case, you don't have to do it. When we do the exercise for today in 104, you're going to be doing all of these to 3 different images. So chances are one of the images that you're working with will need a levels adjustment, if not all of them. And you'll learn it at that point. Curves is another type of adjustment that happens. It allows us to selectively adjust parts of the image. So we can work with the lighter parts of the image. We can work with the darker parts of the image. So for example, we could darken the darks and lighten the lights. Or lighten the darks and darken the lights. Because we can work with different parts of the image. This one verbally is really hard to explain. When you do it, it'll be like, oh, I understand what it does now. So we take an image that looks like this, and we can convert it into an image that looks like that. Certainly the one on the right does look better than the one on the left, but it's hard to pick out why does that one look a little bit better. It's a curves adjustment. Okay, so it's little things, and I'll talk about that. And we'll use a live example because it's a lot easier than trying to explain it here. But I'll do my best. Okay, so on the right here, we have the curves adjustment dialog box that we're going to see. And if we have the image, the first image on the left here is without the curves adjustment. So that's without the curves adjustment. This one is with the curves adjustment. And essentially what we've done is we've taken the straight line that is this image, and we've converted it to this arcing line by essentially lightening the distribution of pixels, and we get this image out of it. Okay, again, it's something that you just kind of have to experience to really understand what happens to it. So then we get to our final results part, and that is exporting them to be used in Facebook or a website or whatever. Obviously, you could send your pictures to be printed. It's very uncommon for people to actually print pictures anymore. Most of the time, we just post them online or post them on Instagram, and that's the end of it. Okay? But you could do it if you wanted to, or you could post them online. When we post them on the website today, I'm going to walk you through how to strip the size down. This is not something that you necessarily want to do for all your images all the time, but for the course load, I mean, you guys are uploading, each of you is uploading 18 photos today, so if you do the math, it's a lot of files. If everybody uploads a 2 or 3 megabyte file, I have to pay to host all of those files. So we're going to drop the file sizes down so they're not quite so big. And I'll show you how to do that today as well. You can create web galleries that you can share with your friends. If you're in the Apple ecosystem, you could do shared albums. It's essentially the same thing. If you're in the Google ecosystem, it's easy to create an album that you can share with friends. You give them the link, they can look at your photos, and that sort of thing. It's a nice thing to do if you're in a party with a bunch of friends and you want to share your photos with them. Or if you go on vacation with somebody or whatever. OK, so this is kind of a two-part. I went through the lecture part. Then I'm going to switch the computer over, and this is the first time we've done this, into demo mode. So I'll show you and walk you through everything that we're going to be doing as part of this. OK, so give me a couple minutes to transition, and then we'll keep going. Any questions? No. OK. OK, so we're going to continue on here. Thanks for bearing with me while I switched computers over to match what you guys have. For exercise 104, we're going to run through a variety of post-processing techniques. And I'm going to teach you how these post-processing techniques work on a variety of different images. As you will notice with my images, sometimes the post-processing techniques don't really do much for a particular image. Sometimes they make a big difference. And so you guys have to learn which ones work and which ones don't. What we're going to start with is we're going to pick 3 of what we consider to be our best images that we shot from last class, from your exercise 103. We'll pick whatever you think the best 3 are, and we'll work with those 3 images. You will end up saving your original image plus 5 versions of that image, and you will post that group of 6 plus another group of 6 plus another group of 6 for 18 total images for today. And I'll walk you through the whole process, so don't worry about it. But let's go through and get our feet wet a little bit in Photoshop. So as with all software, before we actually do anything in Photoshop, I want to walk through the Photoshop interface so that you guys understand what's going on, where it's going on, etc. As part of this. And so I've gone ahead and I've opened up Photoshop. If you don't see Photoshop, sometimes it's listed on the desktop here. If not, you may have to go into your little start menu. Sometimes you have to go to All Apps and then go to the Adobe Design Standard CS6 and then go ahead and open up Photoshop CS6. I don't believe these computers have CS3 on them anymore. We used to have a problem where everything default and opened in CS3, but it doesn't, so I think we're in good shape. We're going to open CS6, which is here. I should point out as we move into Photoshop as part of this class, if you have the Adobe Creative Cloud subscription on your own computer and are using Photoshop as part of that, it's a newer version of Photoshop than what's on these computers. For Photoshop, it generally makes no difference. You can come back and you can work on the files here in the lab on CS6 and go back home and keep working on your files in Creative Cloud. If, however, we're in any of the other software that we're working on, InDesign or Illustrator, it's really cranky when you go back and forth. So just be aware of that for right now. For Photoshop, it doesn't really matter, so you're free to use those as well. OK, so we're going to start first with an image. And I've picked up 3 images here that I'm going to work with. All 3 are different. All 3 have different problems. And I'm going to walk through what those images entail. So I'll use this first image here of some pastries. And we're going to go through. And the first thing that we'll do is convert this image to black and white. And just because I'm doing this first in the order doesn't mean that you have to do it in this particular order. We're just going to go through and walk through some stuff. Now, I'd like to point out that I reference a bunch of tutorials here. So if you went to the course website and you went to Photoshop and you went to 1.1, we're going to do 1.1 through 1.6 today. If I went to 1.1, it would bring up the 1.1 page that walks through everything that we're doing. You could also open this up in your book. you can view like a live demo of this happening if you want to go back and view it. So this is a shorter little video that will walk you through essentially what we're doing today. So all of that's available there for you as well. I'm going to go ahead and do it live so you see me do it live too. So there's lots of ways that you can learn this stuff. But obviously, I think it's important, therefore we're going to work with it. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to walk you through the interface of Photoshop, and then we'll get into creating this into a black and white image. So the first thing is across the top of the Photoshop page, we have our typical file menu setup. Essentially, if we wanted to save something, we'd go to the file menu and go to save. Right? Those are the things you'd expect to be there. There are a few times, like for example, we're going to go to Layer, New Adjustment Layer, and we're going to do a channel mixer momentarily, in which case I'll show you how to get there. Below the file menu is a ribbon that is contextual. It changes based on what tool you have selected. So for example, right now I have the paintbrush tool selected, therefore I get stuff about the paintbrush tool. If I switch to the selection tool, that ribbon changes to have things to do with the selection tool. Does that make sense? So depending on what tool you have, if I have clone stamp, for example, it switches to the clone stamp tools. So that's always going to be changing. Down the left side here, you have your most standard tools. Sometimes tools are hidden underneath other tools. So for example, if you wanted to get to the measure tool, you'd have to click the little triangle in the lower right corner below the eyedropper and choose the ruler tool, for example. Okay? Most of the time, the one that's on top is the one that you're going to use. But when it's necessary, I'll point out where the other options are. On the right side here, we have a couple things. At the very top is a little drop down, and mine is currently set for photography. Okay? We happen to be in the photography section, therefore it makes some sense. Yours is probably set in the Essentials tab. And when the Essentials tab is open, the windows on the right side, or the panels on the right side, are set up differently. So because we're in photography, it makes sense to switch to the photography section, which gives us a few different panels that are open. If we were doing something else, we were doing typography, for example, not that I would ever do typography in Photoshop, I would always do it in InDesign, but if you were and you switched to typography, it would change and show us a bunch of stuff about type. So those little views or workspaces that are set up really do help us out a little bit. So we'll move to the photography section, and now that we have the photography section set, we can move on into our actual processing. There is a layers panel. We'll talk more about the layers panel as we go forward. I'm not overly worried about layers today because what we're doing doesn't really require too many layers. Okay? So above that, we have adjustments. These are shortcuts to get at the same thing that I'm going to create from the menu structure here. And then you're seeing that I have a histogram that's showing me the distribution of colors and pixels in my graph. And we'll talk about that as we go forward. So first thing we'll do is Photoshop 1.1, converting this image to black and white. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go up to Layer, and I'm going to come down to New Adjustment Layer. Every adjustment that we're making today is going to be on its own layer, which allows us to toggle on and toggle off that particular adjustment, which is part of the value of Photoshop. So we can independently turn this image black and white. We can turn it back off when we do a levels adjustment. We can turn it back on if we want. It's very, very flexible. So I'm going to come to New Adjustment Layer, and I'm going to come down to Channel Mixer. When I select Channel Mixer, I'm going to get the New Layer dialog box. It's going to allow me to name the layer if I want to. For right now, Channel Mixer 1 is just fine. I'll go ahead and say OK. And you see over here in the Layers panel that I now have a background layer that contains my image, and I have a channel mixer that's sitting on top of the image. The layers work as if it were a stack of papers. The things, or maybe trace paper is an easier way of thinking of it. The things that are on top, if that makes sense. So the layer stacks work the same way. So here we are in our channel mixer. And our channel mixer, at first, looks like it has more to do with colors. We have red, we have green, we have blue. But what I want to point out is there's a checkbox for monochrome right here. And if we check this monochrome, okay, you see that our image immediately turns to black and white. And if I uncheck it, it's supposed to go back to color, but obviously it doesn't like me today. So I'm going to leave it checked for monochrome, but then I'm going to come up here and I'm going to look at where it says preset. And if I click on preset, currently it says custom. But if I click on preset, we're going to have a bunch of preset options. We have a black and white infrared. We have a black and white with a blue filter, a green filter, an orange filter, a red filter, and a yellow filter. And so this is designed to mimic if you were actually going out in the field and shooting with a camera and you screwed on a piece of glass that was tinted a specific color, it would be a red filter or a blue filter on your lens when you're shooting in black and white. So as we cycle through these, we want to pick the one that looks the best. So I'll pick the first one, which is infrared, and we'll say that, no, that one probably doesn't work. So then we'll move on from infrared. We'll move on to blue. Yeah. We'll move on to green. Okay, that one's not too bad. We'll move on to orange. Okay, it's much lighter. We'll move on to red, a lot lighter. And we'll do the last one at yellow. So one of these is probably going to look pretty good. And it's your job to cycle through and pick which one looks the best. Okay? And I am going to repeat this over and over again, so you see me do it multiple times. So once I'm done, I can minimize this properties, and we can move on to something else. Notice that the channel mixer will allow us to turn on and turn off that adjustment at will. Like that. So let me move on to another image, and I'm going to do the same thing to this image, for example. So here I am. I'll go up to my layer, new adjustment layer, channel mixer. Channel mixer 1 is fine. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to check the box for monochrome. The image is going to convert to black and white. And then I'm going to run through the presets. So we'll do infrared first. Actually, that one's not bad in this case. Blue filter, way too light. And so I'm just cycling through. I think in this particular example, it's either the orange or the red filter that I like the best. I think I like the red filter the best. It darkens up the top of the image and gives me a little bit of vignetting. And therefore, I have that image. So not only am I converting it to black and white, but I'm carefully considering how the conversion is happening, what the balance of colors is in the black and white image, what the balance of grayscale is in the black and white image. And as a result, I'm getting a far superior black and white image than if I just arbitrarily converted it to black and white. So one of the things that people sometimes do when they're converting to black and white when they haven't learned this technique is they go up to the image menu and they just go to mode and they come down here to grayscale. Okay, when I do that, it gives me no options, and you notice this message, discard color information. Okay? To control the conversion, use image adjustments black and white. Right? Essentially what this is telling me is you're about to strip out a bunch of information in your photo. Are you sure you want to do it and trust Photoshop? No, I don't trust Photoshop, so I'm not going to do it. Okay? So we're going to do these adjustments on each of these images. So again, I have 3 images. I'll do this a third time on the last image. I'll go to Layer, New Adjustment Layer, and I'm going to do a channel mixer. We'll say OK. I'll switch to monochrome. And again, I'll go through my various filters until I find the one that I like. When I'm done, I can close that little panel, and we can move on, and I can look at my other images. One of the advantages to this, because it's an adjustment layer, if I decide I don't like this adjustment anymore, I can go back and edit it. So right here on the layer, you see that there's a little icon next to the white page. If I click on that icon, it will, or double click on it, it will bring back up the properties. I can go back in and I can say, you know what, I really liked it better when it was the orange filter. And I can switch it. So none of these are permanent changes to your image. You can always go back and adjust them in any order. So I could be working on my levels, and then I could come back and adjust the black and white. So let me move on into the next piece of what we're going to do. So I've done Photoshop 1.1. Photoshop 1.2 is a levels adjustment. So I'm going to start by turning off my channel mixer that converted to black and white. And that'll give me the color image. You guys will see this happen a little bit better. And what I'll do is I'll go up to the Layer menu again, New Adjustment Layer. So you see almost everything we're doing goes Layer, New Adjustment Layer, something. So we're going Layer, New Adjustment Layer, and this time we're going to go to Levels. So this is a Levels adjustment. I'll call it Levels 1, and I'll say OK. And lo and behold, we get that graph that I was talking about before. And so in this case, if I were looking at the image, the clouds have some pretty bright white in them. So my distribution of pixels gets pretty high up toward the top. So there's not too much I can drop back on the white end. I'll still pull this back just a little bit so that that triangle matches where it bottoms out right there. But on the black side here, it's quite a ways before I get to my start. So I'm going to pull this black over to right about there. And so now we can see the image itself versus the original. So let me turn off the levels adjustment. There's the original. There's the image itself. So it's really bringing out a lot more of the black and a lot more of the shadow, and it makes the image much better than it was. It's even more significant on your computer than it is on the screen. And you guys will see this when you do it. Okay? So let me move across, and I'll do the same levels adjustment to these other images. Let me turn off the channel mixer that converts to black and white, and we'll do the levels adjustment. I'll go to Layer, New Adjustment Layer, Levels. Say OK. And in this case, my image actually spans almost the entire black to white. So I told you sometimes these adjustments just don't apply. And you see that there's some logic in my choosing the images that I chose, because some of them will apply and some of them won't. But in this case, if I were looking at the cloud, that is almost pure white right there. And if I were looking at maybe this branch or one of the branches up here, that's almost pure black. So I kind of already have both in this spectrum. I could potentially pinch that over just a little bit to get a little bit more black out of it. It's not going to make too much of a difference. The white is all the way right up against there. So I'm not going to worry about that one so much. Let me move on here to the last image. Again, I'll turn off the black and white. I'll go up to Layer, New Adjustment Layer. I'll go to Levels. And now in this one, the black, I have almost a pure black right there as part of this. But the white isn't pure white. So I'll pull the white back to right about there. And then we can turn it on and turn it off. It's subtle, but it does help just a bit. So in this context, I've gone through 3 images and I've done the levels adjustment. The one that was most significant was this image. I saw the biggest change here. I saw the least amount of change here, and I saw a tiny bit of change here. So as you go through your images, sometimes this is going to apply and sometimes it's not. I still today want you to try this on every one of your 3 picked images. Does that make sense? Okay, so you're going through all these steps on every image. It is also important to point out that we can layer up the images. So we did the black and white first, but we can also turn on the levels and get a little bit more out of that black and white. So it doesn't mean that these have to be independent operations. They can stack one on the other, which is sometimes very useful. I'm going to leave the levels on all 3 of these for right now, but I'll leave them in color. So we've done Photoshop 1.2. You guys get where this is going. Next, we're going to work on Photoshop 1.3, which is curves. And I told you this was the hardest one to explain verbally what was going to happen, but I'll show you live essentially what can happen with a curves adjustment. So for curves, we're going to go to Layer, New Adjustment Layer, and this time we're going to pick Curves. And I'll go ahead and call this Curves 1. I'll say OK. And here I am with my curves. So now this dialog box, and I wish I could make it a little bit bigger, is a little bit more confusing to read what's happening here. And so essentially what we have is we have a point that is black down here at the bottom. We have a point going to the right that becomes white. We have a point going straight up that becomes white. So we're graphing the distribution of pixels like the histogram levels adjustment kind of on its side, okay, which is a little bit weird to think about. The lighter parts of the image are controlled up here. The darker parts of the image are controlled down here. So for example, if I wanted to darken the darker parts of the image, I could drag this curve down, and you can see that the darker parts of the image are changing. Notice, however, that the clouds aren't changing too much in this example. The clouds are staying fairly light. But the rocks and stuff in this image are definitely getting darker. On the other hand, if I wanted to lighten the lighter parts of the image, I could pull this up. And you can see that I'm brightening just the highlights of the image, not the darker shadows. So the darker shadows are staying the same. Likewise, I could darken those a little bit. Okay? I'm going to undo both of those. By the way, in Photoshop, if you want to undo more than one step, Control-Z will do one step, Control-Alt-Z will keep going backwards. Otherwise, you get stuck in one step. Yeah?
Why did you click on those certain points on that line?
I didn't, those were arbitrary. I'm going to show you why to click on a certain point at this point. If I were to hold down Alt and click at some point on the screen with this eyedropper, it would allow me, apparently it doesn't like me to click on Alt. It's supposed to put a point where the, you gotta love when it doesn't do it, right? See, it doesn't always work for me. You're supposed to be able to click Alt and have it assign a point based on where the value is. So essentially, to answer your question, or to try to, because it's not doing what I want it to do, the various distribution of colors, if I were to pick something darker, say something in the rocks here, that would show up further down on this curve. The closer it is to this bottom, the darker the color tone is. If I were picking something up here in the light grays, it would show up further on this curve. Generally speaking, what we're going to want to do is peg the center or the mid value at the middle. So I'll make a single click right at the center. Oops, wasn't quite on it. I'll put a single click right at the center, which pegs the middle value. And I'm going to take the lighter part of the image, and I'm going to drag that up just a bit. And I'll take the darker part of the image, and I'll drag that down just a bit. And so what this is called, this swoop up, it looks a little bit like an S on its side. This is called an S curve, which is typically the right style of adjustment to use the curves adjustment. So let me turn off, I'm going to turn off levels for just a second, and we'll see if we can see this transition a little bit more. So there's the original image, and there's with the curves adjustment. So it's enhancing regions of the image in different ways. This becomes even more powerful once we add in layer masks, so that we can apply this adjustment to only a specific part of the image. That's coming in probably 3 or 4 lectures. And in that case, you'll start to understand how I could really enhance just the sky and not worry about the rest of it. So it can get a little bit better. For right now, this is our typical S-curve, which is generally what we're looking for as part of the image enhancement. So let me do it again on another image and see what happens here. So I'll go to Layer, New Adjustment Layer, and we're going to do Curves. And here I am again. I'll peg the center point there. I'm going to pull up slightly on the lighter side, and I'll pull down slightly on the darker side. Obviously, I can pull this too far, so we don't want it to pull quite so far. It's about like that. And now if I were to turn off everything, you could see the subtle change. I can see it better on my computer than you can. There's definitely some improvement right in here in that shadow, and some improvement down here. Unfortunately, in this particular image, there's a lens flare right here that you guys can't see. I guess it's fortunate you can't see it, but I can. Let me try it with this last one. I'll do a Layer, New Adjustment Layer, Curves. There it is. I'll peg the center value. I'll lighten up those lights just a little bit, and I'll darken those darks just a little bit. That. And you'll see where we are originally and where we are afterward. So we're enhancing those colors just a little bit as part of this curve. That one might be a bit much. This image is very oversaturated to begin with. So you have to figure out what the right balance is. The cool thing about this is I can always adjust the opacity of this, so I could take this down and not have it apply quite as much. So it's applying half of the filter instead of all the filter. But that's kind of an advanced topic. We'll get there a little bit later on. OK, so I've gone through and I've done the curves adjustment on each of these. The next thing that I'm going to do is something that is called pop. And I'm going to go ahead and do this adjustment. We're going to once again go into the channel mixer adjustment layer. So I'll go to New Adjustment Layers. We're going to do Channel Mixer again. And I'm going to rename it this time to be Pop, so it's a little clearer for you guys. And I'll say OK. And essentially what the pop is going to do is it's going to push the color values a little bit in the image. Remember I showed you that saturation versus vibrance in the side-by-sides, and the people's faces got really orange in the saturation adjustment. In this context, if I do this kind of pop, I'm not going to get the orange, but I'm going to get more saturation in the colors. So there's a technique for how this happens. And so what I'll do is I'm going to, instead of checking monochrome, which we did before, I'm going to leave it in color. I don't know why this is flickering so much, but I'm going to leave it in red, and I'm going to take the red value here, and I'm going to bump that to 116. You could do 116, 118, 120, something in that ballpark. I found 116 to be pretty good. The problem, though, is if I do that, I'm starting to oversaturate the image, so I need to compensate for that a little bit with the other color channels. So I'll take green, and I increased by 16%. I'm going to decrease by 8% in green and blue. So I'll do -8 and -8. So my total here is always equal to 100%. So I've done that for the red channel. It's 116 minus 8 minus 8. I'm going to switch the output channel from red to green, and this time green is going to be 116, and red is going to be -8, and blue is going to be -8. Oops. Again, all of them together equal 100. Then we'll move on from the green output channel to the blue output channel. So in this case, it would be -8, -8, and 116. So if we were to turn on and turn off this is always one of those ones that's really hard on the screen. You guys probably can't see anything that changes on the screen. If you see it on your own computer, you'll notice a difference in the colors. It pushes the color values up just a little bit. It's supposed to be subtle, but it can make a difference. And I apologize that you guys won't be able to see it so much on the screen. Yeah, you guys can't see it at all. So when you do it on yours, you'll get the idea. So here, I'm going to do it again for practice. We'll go to Layer, New Adjustment Layer. We're going to go to Channel Mixer. I'm going to call this Pop again. I'll say OK. And under the red channel, we're going to go 116 -8 -8. We're going to go to the green channel, -8, 116 -8. And then we'll go to the blue channel, -8 -8, and 116. There it is. And we'll see if you guys can see it on this one. No, of course not, right? So you guys will have to do it on your computers to see it a little bit better. I'll do it one more time on this for demonstration purposes. Yeah. I'm looking for some number, and it's more experience than anything else. And on this one, I'll do it more, and you'll see what happens if it's too much more. I've found somewhere between 16 and 20 is kind of the right value for not oversaturating the image and not underdoing it. You get enough for it. As long as the values equal 100, you're fine. So you can experiment going higher. But what happens is the colors get too saturated, and you start to lose value, and it degrades the quality of the image. But let me do it on this one, and we'll see what happens. Okay? So let me go to New Adjustment Layer. I'm going to go to my Channel Mixer. We'll call this Pop again. We'll say OK. I'm going to start with my red, and this time let's do, I don't know, 160. And then I'll do -30 and -30. Okay, so in this example, you see what it is, and then you see all right in here, the colors get really blown out, and they just all become kind of one value. What happens is there's a maximum color value that we're allowed at 255 in red. That's pure red in the sense of a computer monitor or a computer screen. And so once we start to have too much of it that's above 255, it's all that color red. We can't push it any further. And so if I dial that back from 160 to more like 120, and then we do -10 and -10, for example, and then we look at it, I'm losing just a little bit in here. It's much better. I'm getting more of the red, but I'm losing just a little bit in there. So then you dial it back, maybe 118 and -9 and -9. And that one might be just the right amount. Maybe it's 116. So it's really a matter of experience and knowing that that's about the number that I'm shooting for that will do it. It's not something where I can point to some mathematical equation that says this is why. It's just more visual. That's about what I think. If you do it less than 110, if you did 110 and -5 and -5, I don't think you'd see as much of a change. So it's kind of just a fine line of figuring out what feels right. So in this case, I did it for the red channel. I like using that as an example because you can really see the red because there's so much red in the image. So if I move to the green channel and the blue channel, what was I doing? -9 and 118. There's not going to be too much that's going to change in the green channel because there's very little color that's green in here. So we'll go -9, -9, and 118. And now that one's done as well. And we can see it there. And maybe I pushed that a little bit far. I'd have to go back and double check on that particular one. This one's a hard image to begin with because it has so much red in it. It's a very strong image, yeah.
Whenever we do any adjustments, would you like us just to keep the original picture layer on or some of the other ones on?
So when we get to actually turning it in, I haven't gotten there yet, but we'll go through it. You can choose to make it cumulative where you just keep turning them all on. You can turn just the one that I'm talking about on and off. It doesn't make any difference. You're going to do the original plus all of these. I just want the progression. And so whether you choose to turn it on or turn it off is up to you. So we'll get to that, though. OK, so I've done the pop. The last one that I'm going to do is called dodge and burn. And dodging and burning is something that's kind of a holdover to the old days where you had an actual piece of film and you were developing it in a darkroom, and you could burn the image to make it a little bit darker using certain chemicals when you were developing the film, right? Well, we don't have a darkroom. We don't have chemicals. We don't have any of that. But we do have Photoshop to do it for us. So I'm going to go through what dodging and burning can do on a particular image. So in this case, I'm going to turn back on my levels and my curves. So I have my overall image here. And I'm going to create, this is the one layer that we're going to do a little bit differently. And that is that when I go to the layer menu, instead of saying new adjustment layer, this time it's just going to be layer, new layer. It's just a basic layer. And I'll click on layer, new layer. I'm going to call this one dodge and burn. And before I click OK, I have to do a few things to the layer. The first thing is under mode here, I need to switch from normal to overlay. This is called a blending mode, and I'll spend an entire lecture talking about blending modes. So we will get to what this means. But for right now, all you have to do is change it to overlay. So my mode is set for overlay. And I'm going to check this box below it that appears. Notice it doesn't appear. If I'm in normal, it's grayed out. I can't do it. But if I switch to overlay, I can check this box for fill with an overlay neutral color of 50% gray. Okay, again, that doesn't mean anything to you yet, but it will mean something to you down the road. So right now, it's checked. It's overlay. It's called dodge and burn. And I'll go ahead and say OK. And so this layer looks a little bit different than the other layers that I've created. In this case, there isn't a little icon in front of the white square. In this case, there's just a gray square. And so making sure that that is the active layer, which means it's highlighted in kind of this lightish gray blue color, I'm going to come over here and I'm going to move my way down. And there looks, in all likelihood on your screen, there's going to look like a little fist looking thing. You're going to pick that. If you don't see that, it might look like a pin, a round thing with a line in it. Okay, there's two different options. The dodge tool is this round thing with a line on it. The burn tool is like a little fist looking thing. Okay, I'm going to select burn first, which is the little fist thing. And when I have that selected, I'm going to look up here at the top ribbon that is contextually aware, that changes. And I'm going to make adjustments to my brush size. And so my brush already happens to be a 400 pixel brush, which is about what I want. So the size is set for 400. The hardness is set for 0. That's the way I want it. Okay? If, by the way, the brush size isn't correct, and I'll do this sometimes without thinking, you can adjust the brush size using the bracket keys, and it will make it get smaller or make it get larger. Again, I'm shooting for about 400 for what I'm trying to do. Okay. So now that I have the burn tool active, my brush is at 400, my hardness is set to 0, I'm going to lightly paint in the top of my image. I'll run down the sides a little bit, I'll run down the bottoms a little bit, and I'll work my way back up there. And so if we're looking at this, can you see how I selectively darkened around the edges a little bit? Let me move to another piece here. Okay, this one I really want to make some corrections down in here, which is where my lens flare is. Unfortunately, you guys can't see it anyway. But this is a good opportunity to use dodge and burn. So once again, I'll go up to Layer, New Layer. This is called dodge and burn. My mode is set to overlay. And I'm going to check the box for fill with the neutral 50% gray. I'm going to go back to my burn tool. In this case, I think it needs to be a little bit bigger. I'll use the bracket key to make it a little bit bigger. And then I'm going to darken up this lower part of the image, which I didn't like. I told you I didn't like that. We'll darken that up just a little bit more. And maybe I'll darken a bit of the sky up in there, maybe a little bit more in there. And again, it's a matter of the visuals, you know, what feels about right. Okay? Once it looks about right, that's good. Now, sometimes you don't like what you did, in which case you can go back to the dodge tool, which is selectively lightens the image, and you can go back and you can lighten up parts of the image. Maybe you can lighten up something in there to get a little bit more highlight. And so you can see how that's changing what the image looks like.
How do you make it light?
So I switched from the burn tool to the dodge tool. And when I switched to the dodge tool, that allowed me to make something lighter. Now, one thing I want to point out with this is that if you use the dodge and burn directly on an image itself, and so I'm going to do it right now. You guys aren't going to be doing this, but let me come over here into the background. If I did dodging and burning on the layer itself, which I can do, let me burn it. For example, let's make this a little bit smaller. Right, I'm going to burn this. Boy, it turned out too dark. I don't like it. Let me go back to the dodge tool. Right? The more times I do this, the more information I'm going to lose in the original image. So now, oh boy, it's too light. Let me go back to the dodge tool, or the burn tool. See, I'm really destroying parts of that image if I were zooming in and looking at it. It starts to get really ugly. Right? There's like this rock. Let me switch to a pointer so that you guys can see it here. That rock there is turning red. Like, it's just issues. Right? It's very... So because I'm doing it on the layer itself, I run into problems. If I do it on the dodge and burn layer, however, it's always turn on, turn off, delete, redo. You won't cause any problems with it. Okay? So it's just something to really point out. Let me go back a little bit. And of course, it won't let me go back past that, but that's okay. Whatever. So let me go back and do one more dodge and burn, and I'll do it on this image here. Let me go into my layer, new layer. Dodge and burn. Mode is set to overlay. Fill with the 50% gray. There it is. We'll go back into my burn, and I'm going to selectively burn in this image just a little bit around certain parts of this pastry. And so this is a little different than the overall pieces, but I'm enhancing just a little bit of the pastry itself in certain areas. So like there, it's a little bit, you see how I'm tweaking it just a little bit? And so if we look at what it was before to what it is now, see, it's just subtle. But doing that selective dodging and burning can really enhance certain edges or certain pieces of that one pastry. So I'm not doing it as a whole. I could do it as a whole. I could make my brush bigger, and I could darken up the background a little bit or whatever. But I was using it in this context not so much for that, but to really accentuate the pastry itself. Okay, so you can work on a small scale if you want, or you can work on a larger scale. Okay, so what we've done is we've gone through making an image black and white, levels, curves, pop, and then dodge and burn. So when we get to the end of our session in Photoshop, there's a couple things we need to pay attention to. One, there is a Photoshop file that will save all of the layers that we have. So before I move on, I want to go to File and then Regular Save. So File, Save. And it's going to ask me to save in a Photoshop.psd file. That's what we're looking for. Let me create a new folder for today. This is fall of 2017. And we can leave it as the default name. Again, I could rename it if I want. And I'll go ahead and click on Save. This maximize compatibility is what allows you to go backwards and forwards. So if you have CC at home, you make sure you leave this checked, and it'll go backwards when you open it here. So that's saved as a PSD file. I'll do the same thing for each of these images. Let me go to File and Save. We'll make sure it goes in today's folder. There it is. Save. Last one here. File. Well, you know what? That one's so ugly. We're going to skip that one. OK, so I have these two left. Now I need to go through and I need to make the JPEGs that I'm going to post online. OK, so first thing is I need my original image, which is the image itself. So I have everything turned off except for the original image. So we see all the layers are off. The only one with the eye is my original image. And I'm going to go to File, and then I'll go to Save for Web. I should also point out that in the Creative Cloud version, if you're working on your home computer, they got rid of Save for Web. I think it's called Save for Web Legacy or something now. They're trying to get rid of it, in which case you do a Save As and the options are different. For these computers, we're going to do a Save for Web. And when I do Save for Web, it's going to bring up this Save for Web dialog box. There it is. And if I press Control-0, I can see the whole image, but it doesn't really matter. And under Preset up here, I'm going to pick JPEG High as my preset. And then I'm going to come down here, and under Image Size, see where it says Image Size? I'm going to change this so that whatever the larger number is 1,000. So I'll type in 1,000. This will significantly drop the size of the image, which will make your life far better when you're trying to upload this down the road. Okay? So I have that set at 1,000. I have JPEG High set here. I'm going to click on Save. It's going to ask me where to save it. So I'm going to go back into my flash drive, today's exercise 104. This is fall of 2017. And I'm going to save this as my file, and then I'll underscore original. So there it is, set as _original.jpg. And I'll go ahead and click on Save. Then I'll go in and I'll say, OK, I'm going to turn on the black and white. And I'll go ahead and save this one. Now, you guys were asking earlier about, do we have to do it one at a time? You can stack these together. You can turn on multiples. I just want one of each thing, if that makes sense. So you end up with 6 total images. But you could leave the black and white on as you go up and save subsequent ones, or you could turn that one off. It doesn't matter. It's up to you. So I'm going to go ahead and turn everything off except the black and white. There's the black and white. I'll go to File, Save for Web. Okay, same thing. JPEG High, image size 1,000. Click Save. This time it's not going to be original. It's going to be black and white. So I'll do _BW for black and white. And I'll go ahead and click Save. I'm going to go ahead and turn off the black and white, and I'm just going to work with levels because I'd rather do it that way. I'll go to File, Save for Web. You guys are getting the idea here, right? JPEG High, 1,000. There it is. I'll go ahead and click on Save. This one is no longer the BW. This was levels. I'll click Save. We'll turn on the curves. File, Save for Web. 1,000. Save. This time I'm going to leave both the levels and curves on and turn on the pop. And I'll go to File, Save for Web. 1000. Save. Save. And then the last one was my dodge and burn. We'll leave that one on. I'll go to File, Save As, or excuse me, File, Save for Web. 1000. Save. And this was, I'm going to do DB for dodge and burn. And I'll click Save. So I've created 6 total images that are in today's folder. There they are, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. You guys will be creating 18 total images because you're doing this for 3 separate images. Okay? Once I have those, I'm going to go onto the course website and I'm going to make a post. But I'm going to do the post a little bit differently than I've done before. On the back of your handout today walks you through how to make the post. Okay? So I'll go up, just like we've done, New Post, and I'll get to the New Post dialog box here. And what I'll do is I'll go ahead and give this a title. So we'll call this Exercise 104, if I can. 104. Okay, and then once I'm done with that, I'm going to come down and we're going to go ahead and categorize this. So let me go here. We'll go to Exercise 104. There it is. So that's categorized correctly. And then I'm going to come up here, and under this Format button, I'm going to choose that this is a gallery. There's so many images that I'd rather have it as a little slideshow that goes through. So I'm going to format it as a gallery, which is good. Then I'm going to come over to this. Sorry, one more thing. On the content, I'm going to check this box for a slideshow on the post page. This won't show up. If this is a standard post, that isn't there. So when I switch to gallery is when I get the option for the slideshow. So I'll turn that on. Then I'll go to the Gallery tab. I'm going to click on Add Gallery or Insert Gallery or Add Images. And this is where I'm going to upload all the files. So I'll click on Select Files, and I'll go into today's folder. And I'm going to pick all the images. So I'll hold down Shift, and I'll select them all. So I click on the first one, hold down Shift to click on the last one. Now, when you do this, this is going to take a bit of time. And the good news is you reduce the file size, so it shouldn't take quite as long. And essentially what it's going to do is it's going to upload, it'll go to 100%, then it's going to say crunching, and you give it a little time. Once all of you do it at once, this will become very slow. So just be aware. If you run out of time and you got to go to your next class, just do it later today. It'll be fast when you do it later today because nobody else will be on the website. Okay? Once they're all uploaded here, I'm going to click on the Save All Changes. There it is. And then I'll close this. And now I still have to set the featured image. So I'm going to come all the way to the bottom. I'll click Set Featured Image. I don't have to re-upload it. It's already been uploaded. We can see it here as they were already uploaded. But I can also filter by just uploaded to this post, which is going to show me only my images uploaded to this post. I think it's set so you only see your images anyway. I'm an administrator, so I see everybody's stuff. So anyway, there it is. I'm going to pick the one that I think is the best. So maybe that one's the best one. And I'll go ahead and say Set Featured Image. And that then becomes the featured image in my post. Okay, I'm going to scroll up here, and I'm going to click on Publish. Yeah, no writing errors were found. You're right. I didn't write anything, so I hope not. Okay, when I'm done, I want to make sure I click on View Post, and that I'm actually getting a post with a slideshow. Yep, there's my slideshow, and I can click through and see all the various images. The reason that I want to do it this way is because then we don't have a page that's infinitely long. It is possible that some of you will, by default, get a gallery of images with a bunch of thumbnails at the bottom. That's okay too. Okay? So that's what we're going for. The instructions are on the back for how you post. If you have trouble doing that, of course, I can help you through that as well. But I'm going to turn you loose. I'm going to stop talking. I know it was a long one today, but we had a lot to get through. 18 total images. Even if you do something and you don't feel like it really helps your image, go through the practice of trying to do it, because there will be a different image that it will actually help. Okay?